Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining me for this special event series as part of American Diabetes Month. Today, I have the privilege of asking author Adam Brown a few questions from his book, Bright Spots and Landmines, The Diabetes Guide I Wish Somebody Had Handed Me. Hello, Adam, and thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm doing well today. Appreciate it.
Before we begin with questions from your book, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2001. I was 12 years old. I'm the oldest of six kids, so a lot of responsibility from a very young age for me. And I think what was interesting is I really struggled with diabetes for the first 10 or so years. And it really wasn't until college that a few things happened that I think turned me around. One was I started taking nutrition classes and really exploring like nutrition and food as a tool for managing diabetes in a way that I think was quite different from how I was educated around diabetes when we were diagnosed. The other was I had just some people around me in college that really prioritized their health, and I think that really inspired me. And then the last was I started an internship working at a place called Closed Concerns and Diatribe, which writes wonderful industry newsletters about the field of diabetes. And so I worked there for a summer and had a good experience. And then I joined there full time and spent almost 10 years there after college. And yeah, so that's kind of been my entry into the diabetes field. And as part of my writing work, I wrote a column called Adam's Corner, and then that turned into a book called Bright Spots and Landmines. And I just finished graduate school in counseling psychology. So I'm working towards becoming a licensed mental health care provider. So that's sort of just another bit of tools that I'm trying to add to the toolkit. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing and congratulations.
Thank you.
For those who have not yet read your book, could you explain what bright spots are and what the darkness is that bright spots light up?
Yes. So I think of bright spots and landmines as a framework for decision making in diabetes. And probably the easiest way to start is to say, like, we all kind of know what diabetes landmines are. And this is the concept of, I do something, let's say I eat a challenging meal, and it's like stepping on a landmine and it explodes and my blood sugars are, wildly high for hours. Okay, so I think we get a lot of coaching around that in diabetes. Like all of our diabetes devices are designed to detect the landmines. When is your blood sugar high? How are you going to fix that? And so we do a lot of that already. And so bright spots are actually the opposite of that. They're this idea that none of us have problems all the time. Like there are times where things are working. And so the idea of bright spots is like, what's working and how can I do more of that? What's actually going well? When is my blood sugar in range? And so I started trying to figure that out. Like, what are the things that work? Which is such a simple concept. And yet I'd never taken the time to kind of write that down. And so the book is sort of a catalog of my bright spots, the very specific things that work, that seem to keep my blood sugar in range, the things I want to try to do more of. And so I just sorted them into four categories: food, mindset, exercise, and sleep. We could certainly add others. You got to make choices. So yeah, that's kind of the concept of the book. And I think what's important is that because most of our minds, most of us at least, mine included, our minds are wired for to focus on the negative or to fix problems, it's easy to overlook bright spots. Like there are things that work in a day. And it's funny, often in presentations, I'll show a graphic of my blood sugars over a 24-hour period. And the graphic has one huge spike in the middle of the day. And we'll look at the graphic as in the presentation, and I'll say, okay, how might what should I learn from this day? Like what could be improved? And, everyone's eyes get drawn to this huge blood sugar spike in the middle of the day. And the point I try to make is that actually there are 23 and a half hours on this day where my blood sugar was in range. Like I was doing something right for almost the entire day. And yet it's so easy to overlook the hundreds of things that go right when one thing goes wrong. And so I think the book is about sort of recalibrating that negativity bias towards like, let's also focus on the things that work. And I think the idea is that, landmines, like they happen. Like I had one this morning where I forgot to, I changed my Dexcom sensor last night and I forgot to update the transmitter ID on my automated insulin delivery system. And so, I woke up at 200 this morning because my blood sugar, I'm used to the system just kind of managing my blood sugar and I forgot to update it. So some landmines happen, they're unavoidable. And I think the key is like when they do happen, I'm not going to beat myself up over that because that was such a simple mistake to make. And I corrected my blood sugar and here we are. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And often individuals who have diabetes work on improving their blood sugar levels in order to avoid diabetes-related complications later in life. But can you tell us why blood sugar levels matters today?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting tactic that healthcare providers use, especially when folks may seem not motivated to manage their diabetes. Like they may, including my teenage self. Like I think I was told like you should manage diabetes to avoid long-term complications. Like, what teenager cares about that? Come on. And I think it wasn't until I got on CGM that I realized when I'm high or I'm low in terms of blood sugars, like that has a major impact on my immediate in the moment quality of life. So I know from my own experience, like when I'm high, I'm quite irritable. I'm not very nice to be around. I have a short temper. My energy's pretty low. And when I'm low, I have like a brain fog. Like my processing of information is really slow. I tend to sweat a lot, which can be embarrassing, like in public situations. And I'm really hungry. And so it's just generally unpleasant. So all of that matters today. Like in terms of the things I care about in life, the things I want to do, the things I value, my blood sugars actually matter right now. And so I think that is an important like time shift that becomes clearer when wearing CGM. But for those who take finger sticks, I think it can be a source of motivation. So for the people around me who I care about in my life, I actually care about having in-range blood sugars because I'm a much more pleasant person. I'm much kinder. I'm much more of my best self. So I think those are some of the things that I wish I talk about in the mindset chapter, because this sort of long-term complications, I think it can be very motivating, but it can also be like, well, it's so far in the future. I don't care. Yeah.
That makes sense. It seems like you can find success in all the areas of your life when you have your blood sugar under control today.
Yes.
How does policing your own negative mindset help you live well with diabetes?
Yeah, I would say that I don't quite police it because the negative thoughts are just going to come. Like those are just part of the human experience and they're part of living with like a really challenging chronic disease. So I think the difference is like, one, I don't hold on to the negative thoughts like so tightly that they just consume my whole psychology for a whole day. So with that example I shared earlier of like forgetting to update my transmitter and waking up with a really high blood sugar this morning and not sleeping well, like I've let that go. Like I'm on to my day right now, instead of like beating myself up, being frustrated about it, saying, oh, I can't believe that I like forgot to do that. It was such a simple thing. And then it just like, it starts to color my whole day with guilt and frustration and irritation and anger. And then the emotions just stack on top of each other. So I was like slightly frustrated this morning, but like, I let it go and I just took action and here we are. So the negative stuff happens and I think I just try not to hold on to it. And I try to take action when possible. And sometimes there's literally no action to take. It's like my infusion set just failed. My blood sugar is high. Like that's completely not my fault. So I think that's another piece around diabetes landmines is they tend to be things in my control rather than just the random shenanigans that happens in terms of living with diabetes. Okay. And then on the other side of it, I do try to deliberately remember, like, what are the things that I'm doing well or that I'm working hard on that I might be forgetting about or ignoring. So taking that example from this morning, like, I did check my blood sugar when I woke up. I did take insulin to correct it. I am going to walk my dog after this. Like, that's like a series of bright spots, like things that work that would be easy to forget if I'm just focusing on the negative piece of it as well. So I would say it's just like a matter of focus, and also a matter of like how hardly I grip onto, the negative stuff, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And what kind of dog do you have?
He's a miniature schnauzer. Yeah.
Oh,
he's
adorable.
a senior dog at this point. So we're always navigating his chronic health challenges as well. So
Thank you. You talk about using Tupperware to mix up chia seed pudding in the front row of a diabetes convention. What would you tell those who worry about the attention they might receive if they go against the conventional?
yeah, I love this question. Honestly, most of that story of like, what will people think? What will they say? It's just in my own head. People do not care. They're so focused on their own stories and they're in their own head that it just doesn't matter. So I constantly have this experience of like, I generate a story in my head about like what a big deal something is, and then it turns out to be 0% big deal. Zero. And I think that is a good example of it. We feel this like embarrassment around it, and it's just not a big deal. I'll give you another example. I took too much insulin for a lunch at work the other day, and I was pretty low. And as I mentioned, when I'm low, I'm sweating, and it's also just unpleasant. So I was in a room with other colleagues at work, and I was like completely low and sweating. And this story was coming up about like, oh my God, they probably see like how low I am and how much I'm sweating, and it's so embarrassing, and I can't believe I did that. And then I talked to my colleagues after and told them, what had happened. And they were like, oh, I had no idea. I had no idea. And I think there's I just have that experience all the time. And so now I know when that story comes up about, oh, what are people going to think? I just know that's another thought, and it's probably not the actual truth. Yeah.
Thank you. We often hear the phrase everything in moderation, but at restaurants, this is difficult to accomplish. Can you explain why moderation was difficult for you and what you did to help?
Yes. So typically at restaurants, like the meal has been composed, right? So if it's a sandwich with fries, let's say, I just know over like all the experiences I've had at restaurants, if I just order what is given, and I make this plan of like, oh, I'm only going to have like a few French fries when it comes. So like the food comes, there's the sandwich, there's the French fries. I'm only going to have a few French fries. But that actually never happens in reality. Like, I always eat all of French fries or all of the tortilla chips or whatever stuff is on there, which might be fine if I had planned for it, took my insulin 15 minutes before and all of that, and was experienced at dosing insulin for potatoes and tortilla chips, but I'm actually not. So what generally happens is I plan on moderation. I end up eating all of the stuff, and then my blood sugar is high for hours. So what I just found was easier was when ordering to say, hey, instead of the fries, can I do a salad or some food that I know is more of a bright spot for me? And that ended up being easier because I could make the plan up front and order it, And then when it came, I didn't have to do this like insane willpower challenge of trying to avoid the delicious looking French fries. So I think I say in the book, like, it's easier to have willpower when ordering than it is to have it when the food is right in front of you. So I try to move it earlier, basically. And that seems to work pretty well. Yeah.
Another tip you have in your book is about how when a restaurant serves breads or chips, you actually ask the waiter to take them or you'll put them on the other side of the table. Are those you're dining with understanding of this?
Yes. Well, normally I just dine with one other person who's my partner. So yes. In larger group, like, have I ever done that in a large group? No, I haven't. But I think in a larger group, it's easier because the table's bigger and it feels like there's more eyes. So I'm not going to eat like, 37 tortilla chips. But again, this is another great example of like the story that I'm generating in my head about like, oh my God, what does everyone think? They're going to think I'm such a weirdo. They're not going to understand. But it's like they're in their own stories. They don't care.
You have the two to notice yours.
Yeah. So yeah, just another example of that, probably.
One of the many things I could relate to was positioning yourself away from the kitchen to avoid snacking. And then so many more of us are working now from home. Do you have any recommendations for those doing remote work to keep their blood sugar in check?
Yes, I love this question. Yes, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, so there's no escaping the proximity to the kitchen, really. It's like, am I going to be 10 feet away or 20 feet away? And I did work remotely during the pandemic, and I did do school remotely, actually, because of the pandemic. So a couple things. I think not having, all of us have those foods, or at least I have foods where if I have like a couple, I'm going to have like a crazy amount, at least for me. So I just try not to have those in the house. That seems to help a lot. I've also tried to be I've gotten much better at not eating stuff after dinner. So not snacking after dinner. It's easy to just sort of like snack on things here and there. So I would say those 2 tips have helped. It is interesting because I'm now working back in person. My blood sugars have improved. I think part of it is that I'm not at home all the time snacking. Even if I'm snacking on stuff that is lower carb and is kind of the way I eat normally, like sticking to my plan, I'm still around it. And so it's easy when feeling bored or whatever to just like walk into the kitchen and snack on something. And it's funny, in one of my classes, in my addictions class in grad school, we had to give up something for 2 weeks. Something we felt like we were really, addicted is a strong word, but like that we needed to live with. And so I gave up caffeine. Ooh. And that was pretty challenging for me. And one of the things I learned from that is that I often use caffeine as like when I'm bored or when I feel like the slightest bit tired, so I use it as this like emotional change strategy, which I actually was not aware of until I actually gave it up and then noticed when I had the urge to go make tea or coffee, and I just noticed the urge and I was like, oh, I'm actually using this because I'm bored right now. Mm. And so that can be an interesting experience, like to give up something and then kind of track your urges to consume it or eat it and just notice like what am I using this food or snack or caffeine for? And I just found it was like often out of boredom or just tiredness, sometimes for anxiety too. Like I would just drink tea or coffee like for anxiety. So yeah. Really
Did you change after those 2 weeks when you brought caffeine back into your life?
Yeah, I think I became more deliberate about like especially not using it in the afternoons because I slept so much better. Mm-hmm. So like not being really careful about not having it because caffeine has a half-life of 8 hours. So it hangs, a 2 p.m. cup of coffee can still affect falling asleep. And I just hate that feeling of like going to bed at my normal time, but like feeling kind of jumpy. So I think it helped me realize too, like how often I was using it in the afternoons. And I think I'm a little bit better about that now. Yeah.
I should take that advice.
Yeah.
Off screen, I have my own caffeine.
Yeah, as do I. I have very I have very few vices though. So like I just made the decision not to drink alcohol, and so I don't know, like I'm keeping caffeine. I'm keeping it. You know, I gotta have something.
Absolutely. And through the book, you mentioned several smartphone apps that you've tried, ranging from diabetes related apps to journaling apps and habit trackers. Are there any apps that have worked for you personally that you still use today?
I love that question because you said still use today. So it was funny because in my role as a writer, I would often like review technology. So I would always be downloading different apps and trying them. And I think like a lot of apps are kind of, well, I've had this experience where I download an app and I never open it. How hilarious is that? So I think a lot of apps like don't even meet the bar of I've opened it once. Okay, fine. So then there are some apps like I would use for a week, but then kind of just drop off and not use again. So there's actually a very, very small list of stuff that I've used for years. And I feel like that is kind of the bar for me, because just stuff I use for a week or 2 weeks, like it's cute and interesting, but then I drop off. Okay, so here's what I use consistently. Um, there's an app called Waking Up, which is a fabulous meditation app. It's by the author Sam Harris, and I like it because a lot of meditation is packaged as like stress reduction, and I think that is a very like capitalist framing around meditation. It's actually like a very deep practice around like learning about your own mind. And so the things I was talking about earlier about like noticing when anxiety comes up and what my response is to it, like that is all training around in meditation. And so Waking Up, I think, does a great job of like getting to the roots of meditation as a way of like exploring your own mind. So I really like that one. Calm is like a really popular meditation app, and I just use the free version, but I really like the nature sounds on it. So like there's rain sounds and ocean sounds, and so I'll just use like the free version of Calm with the nature sounds as a way of like also just doing meditation or just breathing in the morning. Strava is like an exercise app, and I'm a cyclist, so I just like tracking my cycling and seeing how many miles I've gone. I did use Fitbit for a long time, but I just got kind of burned out on like tracking so many things in my life. So it's funny because I wrote Bright Spots and Landmines. I really wrote it 5 years ago, and I was just at a different place in my life than I am now. So I think I got a little bit burned out on like tracking everything and running a gazillion experiments. And I'm just sort of at a place now where I kind of know what works for me. I have a very good sense of things. So I don't feel this like incredible pressure to track everything and be obsessed with all the data all the time. So I kind of fell off on Fitbit, and that's been fine. But it was helpful, and I know it's helpful for a lot of folks. And they have diabetes groups in the Fitbit app now, and I think a lot of people find those supportive. I use the Dexcom G6 app obviously because I wear CGM. I use the Loop app for automating insulin delivery. I think those are the big ones. Yeah.
And thank you. I'm going to have to download some of those and make sure to open them.
Well, if you don't open them, that's okay. It's just like, I just view apps as like, they're just digital tools, just like, a journal is a tool. These are all tools. And so if the tool isn't helpful or working, like no big deal, just delete it.
And in the book, another thing you mentioned that you were doing was journaling for 6 months.
Yeah.
Are you still journaling today? And if so, has it benefited you?
Yes. So in the book at the time, I had just discovered this thing called the 5 minute journal. And it's just about like it's really a gratitude journal, I think, but I really liked like the simplicity of it and the structure of it. So it was yeah, like basically like things I'm grateful for today. And then there was another section, and then the idea was like you'd fill it out in the morning and then fill it out at night, kind of as like a review of your day. And now, I mean, now I just use like just a simple small notebook, and I just do the same thing, but I don't buy that journal just because it's like just another thing to order. So I just do it manually, so I write the day on top, I write things I'm grateful for today. And I just do it in the morning. And then sometimes I'll write like things I want to remember today, or things things to do today, or like that. But yeah, I think it's actually, again, like a bright spots thinking practice. Like, what are the things that are going well or that are great in life that I might just be like forgetting about? So I think it's helpful for training that thinking and that mindset again and again. I sometimes will journal on longer topics. Like, for instance, I just finishing grad school, like, and starting work again, like that was a huge transition. And so I tend to process things through writing a lot. So it just helped me, to kind of just write just for my own self, like what transitions are happening right now, what feelings are coming up. And so writing about that, I guess that would be journaling, but just for myself. Yeah.
And you mentioned how you were writing for a diatribe, but how is writing a book yet different?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. I really liked the book writing process. I think, of course, I managed to stress myself out about it in ways that were probably not great, but I think, I mean, it's funny. I looked at all my writing from diatribe and tried to like look at the big picture of it all. And I think what's cool about the book writing process is you have to think about the structure in a bigger way than you do like individual articles. So how do all these individual ideas fit into a larger structure? So for me, it was like, okay, I think there's really two structures in Bright Spots and Landmines. Like, there's the idea of bright spots and landmines as a kind of overarching framework. And then there's the individual chapters of like food and mindset and exercise and sleep. And yeah, I kind of liked that challenge of how do you arrange all of this in a way that people can kind of understand what you're trying to say and put it into action. And I do have this weird love of building things. Like, so I think writing a book and launching it is like a way of building a product, really. So I think that was a cool experience too. Yeah.
And Kelly Close wrote the foreword in your book and describes your book as being laser focused on action. Are there any action items you would like the audience to leave here with?
Yeah, maybe I can summarize one from each chapter. Okay, so in the food chapter, I think the first bright spot is, for me, when I eat less than 30 grams of carbs at one time, like I tend to have more in-range blood sugars. And so I talk about my experience, like testing out different dietary approaches, and that's the one that has kind of stuck and seems to work for me. So I think the action item would be like just noticing how different amounts of carbohydrates at one time affect your blood sugar, and also like different types of food. So 20 grams of carbs from fiber versus 20 grams from fruit juice like have a very different impact on my blood sugar. And so I think it's important to use like glucose monitoring as a tool to measure like how well food is working in my diabetes. And so I think about it as like personalized nutrition, basically. Okay, so that's That's one. And then the other big one in food is this idea of like what I call the hypoglycemia binge, where your blood sugar is so low and you just want to eat everything in sight. And that feels like it makes a lot of sense in the short term, but then in the 8-hour term, just results in really extreme high blood sugars. And I've just done that so many times that I know if I'm low and I go to the kitchen, mistakes will be made. So what I try to do now is treat my lows with glucose tabs, which are not tasty. That is the point. They shouldn't be tasty. Because I think of it as like, when I'm low, I want to dose something to get back into range. Just like when I'm high, I'm dosing insulin to get back into range. And so for me, it's tabs because I can measure them out. Like it's very clear, like this is 1 glucose tab rather than like this is a quarter cup of whatever. I know how much each tab raises my blood sugar. So, for me, it tends to be about 20 milligrams per deciliter per tab. So I know if I'm at 60 and my target is 100, I need 2 glucose tabs to get back to target. And they're quantity limited and again, not that tasty. So I'm not going to eat like 76 glucose tabs. So other people have different strategies around that, but I think like finding a correction food that is predictable, that is quantity limited, that you can figure out your dose can be really helpful for avoiding those explosive hypoglycemia responses. Okay, so that's from the food chapter. The mindset chapter, I guess there would be 2. One is that question you asked about, like remembering today reasons why your blood sugar, like why managing diabetes is important to you. So how do your blood sugars affect your mood, your energy level, your ability to do the things you care about today? Can be really valuable. Making a list of those can be useful. And then the other one relates to actually glucose monitoring data and numbers. And I think in the diabetes field, there can be this tendency to label numbers as good or bad. That's a good A1C. That's a bad A1C. That's a good blood sugar. That's a bad blood sugar. And those are just judgments about it. And they're not helpful because all data is amazing because we can take action on it. We can learn from it. So viewing the data as neutral information, it is actually not good or bad. It's information to take action and remove. What I talk about in the book is all the different factors that affect blood sugar. And in the book, I think I only have 22 and I updated it later to 42. So at least 42 variables affecting blood sugar. I'm going to have out of range blood sugars. Like so much of diabetes is I can't control every factor. So I think it's important to remove the blame and judgment and labels around the data because then it frees us up to not beat ourselves up because we're living with this really challenging disease and to respond appropriately to whatever numbers are coming up. So blood sugar numbers are neutral data. They're not judgments on your performance. They're not grades. I don't even call them tests because I think tests implies a grade. And again, that just gets back into this cycle of like, it's a good, it's a bad grade, that sort of thing. Okay. The exercise chapter, I think walking after meals can be a really helpful strategy. And I do try to do that when possible, especially if I've eaten like a really carby meal, that can help. And then sleep, getting enough sleep is really important for diabetes. Adults need at least 7 hours and the kiddos need a lot more sleep than that. And I think there's a fabulous book called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. And that was, I think, really the book that showed me how many parts of life and of diabetes that sleep impacts. So this disease is just a lot easier to manage if you're getting enough sleep. Unfortunately, diabetes can affect sleep and sleep affects diabetes. And so you get this like circular relationship going on, but figuring out ways to improve sleep, focusing on caffeine, those sorts of things, really, really helpful.
Thank you so much. And then finally, is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
I really appreciate your time, and I want to share with you, even though my family has type 1 diabetes and my husband has type 2, I was most surprised that this book was really useful for me personally, not just an
Okay.
application for them. Just the way you thought about bright spots and landmines, I thought applied to everybody. So I want to thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for that. That's really sweet of you.
And you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take it easy.
Thanks.